This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome everybody to the latest edition of Doc and Jock. I'm the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. I'm back from Indy. We spent the majority of time on Wednesday learning about which edge rushers people like, who is out there. The Michigan guys definitely stood out in regards to their poise and the way in which they conducted business. So it's a good time. But we got to talk about the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Pistons. They're doing some great things. They're staying hot. They're winning games. They're competitive after their respective breaks. And it's a good opportunity to check in with Detroit sports, and especially with what happened with what Brad Holmes said, maybe sparking off a little bit of some realism in regards to, just like Adam has a budget, Doc has a budget, the Lions got a budget. We'll talk about that in the second half of the podcast, because coming out of the All-Star break, the Red Wings are, just coming off of 4 games in 6 days, and they've been, one of the things that people have noticed is that, okay, coming out of the break, a little bit sloppy late in games, giving up leads, but still racking up points, because you're recognizing now, and I'm seeing it too, that in the conference that the Wings play in, it's uber competitive. Dropping points in any capacity is really remarkable, especially with when you look at the standings, it's neck and neck. So when you have a lead and you get to overtime and you give your opponent the free point and you lose a game, it's not a good thing. And it's really crazy because the Red Wings, as of late, have really been, the last couple NHL seasons, have been in the mix in regards to competing for the postseason but not getting there. Now when you look at it, my God, what's been your take from the Red Wings, seeing them coming after the Four Nations face-off?
Yeah, I think, look, it's one of those things where you have a guy like Dylan Larkin who went there, played, really helped add a lot of value to his name. Like, I think coming out of that All-Star break, and that's what we'll call it, coming out of that All-Star break, I don't think anybody on this team added to their worth more than a guy like Dylan Larkin. He was arguably one of the best players in that tournament. And I think you're seeing a team that is now kind of buying in and really has bought into what Todd McClellan has wanted from them. And they're now pulling in the right direction. They're pulling in the same direction. And the game against Minnesota, the first game out of that All-Star break, they had a lead in that game. And you're right, they got sloppy, they got a little complacent, and they ended up giving up a point, and they were able to eke by with getting a point out of that game. And that's important because when you look at the standings, this is a team where we've got about 24 games left in the regular season, and they control their own destiny. If they're going to do anything, they have the ability to do whatever it is that they want to do. So getting points and getting multiple points out of these games that they've had coming out of the All-Star break is incredibly important. And now they're in a driver's seat where they have control over the first wild card position. They're playing the Blue Jackets in back-to-back games. They play them tonight, and they're going to play them on Saturday at the Horseshoe. And look, these games are important because the Blue Jackets are right behind Detroit. They're a couple points away from Detroit in that second wildcard spot. So Detroit can now distance themselves out of that second wildcard spot, and they can start to make up ground and gain ground on a team like Tampa Bay, who is just ahead of them in the standings. So I think Detroit right now, what you're seeing is a revamped mindset, a team that has bought into what Todd McClellan wants from these guys. They're a team that has control over where they're going to end up at the end of the year. And you're seeing a lot of nice gritty play. You're seeing offense where you didn't really have that before McClellan came in. I think the big issue with this team, and we're going to talk a little bit about the trade deadline, I think the big issue with this team is defense. Every time I watch this team play, there are multiple odd man rushes coming back the other way, putting the goaltending in an awkward spot. You go back to that Minnesota game that was first out of the All-Star break there. The game was lost on a weird odd man rush. Now, look, the goal that was given up, I feel like was an incredibly soft goal, but the reason that you got to that spot was because your defense broke down. I see a lot of defensive breakdowns a lot of times. And look, I don't know if that's just the style of play that McClellan wants, where he wants the defense up, helping to pressure to help generate more offense, or if it's more to the fact, and it's something that we're going to talk about here in a few moments, that you need to go out and you need to really address your defensive positioning, because the guys you have back there just don't look good enough, whether they're too young and unseasoned or whether it's just bad play after bad play that's costing you goals going the other way. So I think you've got a team that is really firing on all cylinders, but you got to add a couple of pieces to really help get this team over the hump, because you just don't have enough yet. You don't have enough to, in my estimation, to compete with teams like a Florida, like a Tampa Bay, like a Toronto. And you're going to be going up against other teams that are kicking ass the other way, like a Washington. And you're going to be seeing them in a couple of days here. So I really feel like this team's going to have to really address what it wants to do and what it wants to be as we come down the stretch. But all that being said, I feel like they are in a great spot. And I think you've got a team that has really bought in and is now playing a different style of hockey, a different brand of hockey. And I think it's a winning style of hockey. Now, constantly going to overtime is not ideal. But coming away with wins after going to overtime, you'll take it every day of the week. I think the Wings are in a bit of a precarious situation, because they got to get through this game tonight against Columbus, and then you'll be able to take a little bit of a breath. 4 games in 6 nights, especially for a guy like Dylan Larkin, who played a lot during that NHL All-Star break. It starts to wear on you. You get tired. You get heavy legs. So get through this game tonight. You'll end up kind of figuring out a couple of things as you head into this All-Star. I don't want to call it an All-Star Classic, but it'll be a stadium. What do they call it? The Stadium Series. So it'll be one of these odd games where you're playing outside. It'll be a fun game to kind of see. So you really need to come away with a win here, and it'll be really nice if you could take all 3 points instead of coming away with just 2. But like I said, it leads to something else that's more on Steve Yzerman's plate, and it's at the All-Star break. And you've seen Detroit end up giving up Ville Husso, freed up a little bit of cap space. So you know that they're going to be in the market to make some moves. What do you think Detroit has to do at the trade deadline? Is it simply as simple as getting a top 6 forward? Is it as simple as getting a top 4 D-man? Is it as simple as maybe trying to find just an all-star, just an elite player, and adding them to this roster? What do you think the Detroit Red Wings have to do? Because in my estimation, it's a little bit twofold. I think they do need to add that top 4 defenseman, and I think that's probably the most important piece. If they're going to get something done, it is adding that top 4 D-man. But I would like them to go out and also add a top 6 forward if possible. At the very least, add a third string forward, a third line forward to this team that can help generate some goal scoring, because I think they have the ability when they're pressing to put pucks in the back of the net. I just don't think they come as easy as we would like. There are games where they're putting up 50 shots and they're coming away with 3 goals, and that looks a little bit weird. Now, I like the effort to get the shots and get the puck to the net, and good things happen when you do that, but I would like to see a little bit more efficiency on the offensive side. But I do think defense is the Achilles heel of this team right now, and I think most importantly, they've got to go add a defenseman. What do you think Steve Yzerman has to do at the trade deadline?
No, you're absolutely right. I think you're spot on. You nailed it. But the thing that is always the position, and it's kind of like the Red Wings are in a tough spot because they have good goalies, but they're not ones in which you would say, well, you've already flopped on Husso, you let him go. For that's never good when your trade is, we've let Ville Husso go for cash considerations, you know,
for trade considerations later on.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, cash or
we'll give you a water bottle and a hockey puck, and we'll throw you a $20 bill. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a disaster. You got Talbot, who I think is very familiar with what McClellan likes, and I just realized that the Alex Lyon's not going to be somebody you're going to trust, right? They're big goalies, but it's like one of those things where they're B+ goalies, but we all know that just like in the NFL, you need like a quarterback playing well at the right time. And so I think the Red Wings are going to count on Talbot to get hot. I do think he's the best option at this point in time. Lions, interesting to always pay attention to as well, but there's been moments where he's been a little bit shaky, but that's exactly right. I love the scoring. I love the fact that Kane and DeBrincat and Larkin are definitely doing their thing. Cause can you believe that they took a run at Rasmussen and didn't call a penalty? It was wild. I love the fact, though. I love the grit. I love the fact that, right away after, at the end of the period, boom, elbow to the face and knock the guy down. That's what it's supposed to be about. Like, you can't take a run, and that's unsafe in hockey. If you're going to take a run at players, to not have some officiating here to kind of regulate that, because then you get the free-for-all. Like, if you're going to do that, you're going to end up having a hockey game that's going to be rife with aggression. So I just hope that, look, with this Red Wing team, I think you and I are both in agreement. It's a good team, but it's a team that needs more pieces around it to be competitive. But cause it's just wild to see night in, night out how tough it is to secure those 2 points. My goodness. But credit to McClellan. You see the difference. And and every time we talk hockey, I just think that the thing that's most regrettable is I think Yzerman should have just made this move to fire Lalonde at the start of the year. I feel like they could have been 10 points ahead if they had a rejuvenated room there with young players that wanted to perform. The start of the year, to have that much time go by where you don't play good, it's unusual. But do you think this is the time now for Yzerman to say, all right, maybe a third rounder, let's go maybe trade one of the young pieces that we got for an established scorer, forward, reserve, someone that you could, affordably bring in here? Is it time to make the move? Do you think they do it?
I don't think they do it, but I do think you're getting to that point where you're going to have to do something like that, right? It's not, I don't think they're in a position right now where they're going to be a team that is competing for a Stanley Cup. I think this is a team that is looking to get into the playoffs and is looking to be a hard out for certain teams. And I think they're there. I think you need to start to really evaluate making that big move, though. And I think if you do make that big move, it's going to be somebody who has a little bit of term on their contract. It's not going to be for a guy who you're trading who's you got a 1-year deal with. It's going to be a guy that if they do have a 1 year left on that deal and it's expiring, you're looking to re-sign them, and you've already kind of got some type of a contract game plan laid out with them and their agent, where you can make that move for them and you can bring them in, and then next thing you know, they're re-signing in the offseason. But I think at a certain point, you've got to look at trading away some of the pieces that you've got, and you've got to maybe make a move to get somebody in here who's going to really impact this roster. Because I think some of these littler moves that you make, like in Andrew Kopp, yeah, I know he's on IR, but does he really impact your roster? I mean, this is a guy that you gave a bunch of money to, and now he's on IR, and I don't necessarily think this team has missed a beat with him not being there. Like, that kind of tells you what his value is to this team. I just don't think he's necessarily the guy. And I don't think those types of moves for guys like him or in that ilk are really what you need at this point. You need to go out and get a guy that is more like a DeBrincat. And look, we were all very high when DeBrincat got here, when DeBrincat was traded for, and I don't necessarily know if that move has brought in the corresponding wins like we've wanted. So I feel like this team is kind of in this weird Groundhog's Day where it's kind of like you're not quite good enough to be with the elite teams, but you're also not bad enough to be able to get those life-changing draft picks where you can get in that, generational type of player. It's just kind of, you're always kind of stuck in this weird little middle area. So they've got to make a move. They got to figure something out. Now, maybe you were talking about goaltending. Maybe Kosa is that guy. Maybe we see him towards the back stretch of the season where we've got 5-10 games left. Maybe he makes a solid impact, and he's on this roster as they get into the playoffs, and he's the guy who maybe takes charge of that goaltending room, and that really helps free up a little bit of movement in the offseason for Detroit with like, okay, cool, we've got our goaltender. That has worked out. Now we can go focus on building around that young goalie. Maybe that's the move. I don't know. But I feel like they're going to have to do something at some point because what they've got going on, it just kind of feels like you're stuck in that no man's land where you're constantly in competition to get into the playoffs, and you either are just falling short or you're getting walked over as another team moves to that second round. So something has to be done. And I'm not opposed to this team trading away some of its prospects for guys who are in the league, who have a name, who are doing things, and are able to really help transform this roster. They've got to figure something out, because what they've been doing, it feels like it's just a lot of copy and paste, and it's just not getting the job done for this team right now. Understood, man.
It's going to be fun, a fun ride for the Red Wings. But now is the time where Steve Yzerman's got to prove why he's the man, why he. It's a fine balance of adding talent versus thinking, getting to the postseason this year and getting there, and also looking at what's going to be ahead for the next 2 years. But the future is starting to seem a little bit brighter, especially when you incorporate some of the young talent. Lucas Raymond doing well, DeBrincat, on the verge of 30 goals. It's amazing to see. And Patrick Kane is the guy, the sniper that you can count on in some critical moments to be the veteran leader. He's been a nice addition to the roster, and I'm glad he stayed healthy. And it's kind of been maybe a little nod to that little hip shaving situation that he went through, and it looks like the hard work that he put in ended up being worth it. Now, switching gears to the Pistons, because it was nice to see them beat down the Celtics. It was cool to see the vibe, the renewed energy that this Pistons squad has in regards to kind of just going out there and competing. You're starting to see a philosophy. Hey, play defense. Be able to have some defensive energy, some transition. And hey, surround Cade Cunningham with some shooters, and they can do some things. I'm very appreciative of the efforts that the Pistons have made to kind of be kind of like that. Hey, you know what? Why shy away from the gritty mentality? That's what JB Bickerstaff was kind of. I think where it sometimes happens is that for Cleveland, I just think that they were at a spot where their roster didn't need the guy that, as they worked through, the guy that just was harping on them so much. Whereas here with the Pistons, I think there was such a hungry, young, starving group of guys that wanted to be coached up, that led by Trajan Langdon. I think understanding the reasoning why, I think Bickerstaff has come in and also learned a little bit that, okay, I just can't be the brooding coach all the time. I do also have to have this relationship with the players that they understand, like, hey, my role is to coach you tough, but you're here for a reason. And I just think that there's an energy, like you're seeing the social media dances, you're seeing the pre-hype before games, you're seeing a basketball team that's having fun winning, and the youthful energy is coming out. And it's one of those things where 8 games, it's pretty good to look at here. It's a Pistons squad that is starting to make noise, catching everybody's attention, making our rundown week after week after week, because they're fun to check into. They shoot well. They play a nice organ. Look, it's one thing to say, hey, and I think the biggest thing from last year was just a chaotic mess. And they just were a basketball team that didn't learn how to win. Now that they're getting a taste of it, they're like, oh, this is what we got to do. This is what coaching and bringing in talent can do. And I think the experience of Malik Beasley has been a whirlwind, like a jolt of energy. And Tobias Harris, along with Asar Thompson, kind of being able to contribute as well. So this Pistons team was fun. What do you look at when you say this is what you're going to expect now for the rest of the year? Do you say, you know what? Is it that time, even for the Wings too? Do we start to shift our expectation and say, hey, it's not only one thing to get there, but maybe even win some games in the series and compete to advance? I think there's opportunities here to say, if you can grow and do some things. And I think with the Pistons, the biggest thing is that I think there is also in sports a opportunity to get momentum when you don't sell. Like, hey, they didn't move on from Beasley. They respected his wishes to stay, and he goes and says, hey, please just don't trade me. I want to be here. And there's a value in the notion that the Pistons roster said, hey, look, they didn't blow this up to look to the future. So the time is now. And I think the Pistons have done a lot of good things to make this turnaround happen. What have you seen? What's the reason why the Pistons have gotten 8 wins in a row?
Well, look, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword here with this team, and this is why they are so fun to watch, because you mentioned they can go out there and they can play defense, and they stifled a team like the Boston Celtics, who are one of the best teams in their conference. Celtics are a team that can just sit there and light up shots behind the arc. And this was a team that was able to come in and really put a little bit of water on that fire and help smother out the Boston Celtics. And you go back a couple of days previous, they played the Hawks, and that was a game where they almost scored 150 points. So if they've got to do it on the defensive end, they can. And if they've got to go out there and they've got to score points on the offensive end, they can. And I think what you're seeing is the maturation and the growth of a guy like Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham is your all-star on this team. He is that guy who was drafted 1-1. He is that guy. He is finally coming into his own. He is making sure that contract that he got, that rookie extension that he got, he's showing that he is well worth all of that money right now. And I think this offense and I think this team has to run through him. Yes, the Detroit Pistons were able to take out a team like the Boston Celtics, but go to the box score, right? Yeah, Malik Beasley had 26 points. He was the guy who was the big point getter, right? But Cade still had 21, and most importantly, he had 11 assists. So that means he was facilitating to other guys. He was making other guys better. You go to the game against the Hawks where they almost put up 150 points. I think he had something like 39 points in that game. Like he lit up the scoreboard. So Cade Cunningham is finding ways to help this team win games and is helping this team get into position to where they're going to be an incredibly hard out when they do get into the playoffs. It's not so much if, it's when they get into the playoffs. And I think when they get into the playoffs, this is going to be a team that will be a 4 seed. They are going to probably end up taking on the Indiana Pacers, and that's going to be a fun series. And I think they can win that series. So I think you're right. Expectations have to be adjusted. Things have to be reworked a little bit. You've got to start looking at this team a little bit differently. This is a really good team that is playing sound fundamental basketball and has the ability to flip a switch and score points. And I think it is all led by Cade Cunningham, which I think makes for a interesting conversation that we're going to probably have at the back end of this season, maybe into this offseason, because you see what this team is able to do with Cade in control. With the ball in Cade's hand, this is a very dangerous team. So what happens to Jaden Ivey when he comes back? What do you do with that guy who it seems like when him and Cade are on the court together, it kind of bogs down. It's not as free flowing. Now, yeah, he's got immense ability and he's a guy who still has a very high ceiling. But as the Pistons, do you have to move away from him? Do you maybe have to look at possibly trading him away and maybe getting something back in return, something else that could help this roster? Because it looks like Malik Beasley, it looks like Cade Cunningham, looks like Jaden Duren are kind of the guys that you're looking to maybe build around right now, looking like the guys that are going to help you win games when you get to the playoffs. Jaden Ivey this injury that he had might have been a bit of a blessing in disguise. You might not need him, and he still has value in this league. So maybe you package him, trade him away, and get something back in return. Do you see a possibility where this team moves away from a guy like Jaden Ivey, packages him up, gets maybe another piece that can help build and help add to this roster, another maybe a core member? Maybe you have a core 4 with this group instead of your big 3. Do you see something like that possibly happening? Because the way they're playing right now without him has been inspiring, to say the least. They're out there able to score points. They're able to lock guys down and shut guys down. Do you see the ability for them to possibly move away from him and add to this team at the same time?
Yeah, see, I think they like Ivy. I think they like what his potential is.
I do too. I think he's got a high ceiling. I think he's a good player, but the way that they're playing right now is freaking crazy.
Right.
Like I said, team was able to go out and put 150 points out on a team who's in competition to get into the playoffs as well, and you were able to sit there and beat one of the top 2 teams in the Eastern Conference just last night. So do you need him? I don't know if you do. And I think the team plays better without him.
Well, the idea is going to be what he looks like when he returns. And what you started to see was a player that could be, an explosive guy that can also develop a mid-range game, and his shooting prowess is definitely there. They like his athleticism. The biggest question mark is always going to be, and that's what sucks is because we can't see it, could he play alongside Cade Cunningham? And I know what you're saying. You're like, well, don't upset the apple cart. It's a long-term injury, and it's good. It's a good problem to have. I don't think they're going to look to move on from him. I think that any good basketball squad looks to utilize the talent that they have in an effective manner. So I think that, one, hopefully his injury is going to be one in which he can come back and have his explosiveness, his ability to get to the rim. And I think that also, too, it allows you to potentially, early on coming back, have that second unit that can score. You know what I mean? Maybe one unit with Cade, another with Ivy, that you don't have to have a lull in offensive scoring. Because here's the thing. The Pistons are regular season good right now. Postseason, it's different because what happens is it gets a little bogged down. And yes, now they can run and gun. They can smoothly transition up the floor when they get their defensive turnovers. But unfortunately, and I get it, it's NBA playoff basketball, it gets bogged down. You have to have much more prowess in your half-court offense. And I think as many people that can establish their own shot that you have, it's just hard to give up because it's just hard to, it's hard to get players that can establish their own shot. But I'm really excited about the potential of the young players that they got. And I do think that the one thing that I think with the Pistons that now people can trust is that they believe that Trajan Langdon understands what a Piston should look like. Someone that's gritty, tough, can play defense, understands the ability to space the floor, and can make the right pass, and can also understand that, hey, when there's an opportunity to get an open shot, the best shot, to take it. And I do think that Trajan is going to target a lot of young players moving forward that should be contributors. And the young players they got now are starting to, I think we got to start looking at Asar and saying, you know what, do your thing, young man.
Dude, that was a guy who I was not high on when they drafted. I was like, oh man, come on, for real. Like, what is he going to actually add to this team? It's been a lot. And it's been fun to see. And I have no problem taking that one in the face. That was bad on me, but impressed to say the least this season. He's been playing out of his mind.
Gotcha, my man. So it's gonna be fun. Nice stretch for the Pistons, and it's good for the Pistons and Wings to get what everybody has been utilizing to be able to get wins, and that's most important. So the Combine was pretty interesting because it's like basically if you're a wrestling fan and you go to those events where there's a lot of wrestlers all in town, a convention or signings and things like that. It's kind of like that. The NFL world converges. The people that people want to see in the early parts are the coaches and general managers, and then the prospects. So the NFL world, it's a circus out there, and it's basically the NFL world converges for a week to talk about what's going on. It's as you would expect. It's a lot of chaos, a lot of interesting stuff going on. It's an interesting time for the Lions. And unfortunately, Brad Holmes hit, I asked him, I said, what's your message to those people that think you're one guy away? And he's like, well, why would you say one guy? Why don't we need 2 or 3 high-end edge rushers? So I think that I understood what he was saying. He's like, my job is to get as many good players as possible, but it's not realistic. So my question was fair, and it was followed up on by a bunch of other reporters, which was good. Which was my question was, what do you basically open the topic, and the others kind of add the layers. But unfortunately, walking away from Brad, it kind of felt like a big, huge dump of ice down your pants. And this offseason's kind of about like hope, like, hey, can we get the big players? Unfortunately, it's a cold, hard reality that the Lions are going to be built truly in the draft and rounded out in free agency. But I don't see a splash, cuz I don't see a major signing. And here's why. It's not because of lack of effort. It's not like they don't want to. But Brad's like, I can't go out and pay other people's Amazon. I want to pay my own bills. I like what I got. And the Lions are, it may, we have to open the subject. It may open up the idea that this could be a weakness of Brad Holmes, but it's the age-old adage. You draft and develop your own, but they got to pay Kirby Joseph. They got to pay Jamison Williams. They got to pay Aiden Hutchinson. They got to pay, in a couple years, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta. They can't pay everybody, cuz. So That was my big takeaway from Brad Holmes was hey, this is realistic. We're going to pay our own guys. Free agency, we're not going to pay everybody else.
Do you think there's a bit of a danger? And this is something that Dan Campbell very early on spoke about. Falling in love with your own guys. It really feels like Brad Holmes at this point loves the groceries that he picks, and he ends up falling in love with those guys. Those guys become priority number one. Whatever I have to do, I've got to re-sign all my own guys, and I got to take care of all my own guys. When sometimes there's a stake sitting right out there, and you've got it. You've got what it takes to get it. But Brad Holmes is like, no, my top sirloin is better than that ribeye over there, and I'm going to serve my top sirloin. And that's going to be what it is. And if you know anything about steaks, you know that a ribeye is way better than a top sirloin. Top sirloin is fine. It is very good cut of meat. It just does not have the beautiful marbling that a beautiful ribeye has, and does not have the flavor that a ribeye has. And Myles Garrett is that ribeye. And Brad Holmes sounds like he does not want to eat ribeye. He wants to live lean, and he wants to eat top sirloin, and he is going to do whatever it takes to take care of his top sirloin instead of being able to go out and get that ribeye. Look, man, I think it is dangerous to do those things, to fall in love with your own guys. Like, you mean to tell me that a guy you drafted, a guy like, say, this is just, look, just go through the example with me here. A guy like a Hendon Hooker. You drafted Hendon Hooker. You believe Hendon Hooker is going to be the second coming of the backup quarterback. You mean to tell me that a guy like Hendon Hooker is going to get more favorable treatment from you than a guy who has the ability to go out there and win football games and has done it in the past? We'll say let's say a guy like Geno Smith was to get cut from Seattle, and Geno Smith all of a sudden becomes available. Geno Smith would be a much better backup quarterback than Hendon Hooker because he's done it. He's won games. I don't think Geno Smith is any second coming of the quarterback, but he has the ability to go out there and win you football games and help. If heaven forbid Jared Goff gets hurt, he has the ability to sit there and take over a team and do what it takes to get you W's. And to me, it feels like Brad Holmes wouldn't even entertain that thought because he drafted Hendon Hooker, and Hendon Hooker is going to be the guy. You know, I don't like to necessarily use that example, but you kind of get what I'm saying. I feel like there are blinders on Brad Holmes when he's trying to put together this roster, and it is only guys that he has drafted, and it is only guys that when they get to free agency, it feels like they're either coming off of an injury or they're willing to take a one-year deal. He does not want to invest long-term money in any of those free agents. And here's my whole thing with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett has 2 years left on his contract. You can just make a trade, and I'm only looking to keep Myles Garrett for 2 years. And the way your salary cap is currently structured, you'd be able to afford him for the next 2 years. Do you think that there is maybe a little bit of hubris here with Brad Holmes when it comes to his own guys? And do you think maybe putting together your roster this way is hindering this team from really advancing and getting to the Super Bowl? You've seen the last 2 years. This has been some of the best Detroit Lions football you and I have ever seen in our lifetimes. And you fell about 30 minutes short of getting to a Super Bowl 2 years ago. And you didn't even win a game this past year. You might have to maybe reevaluate how you and put together your team. Wouldn't you think?
Right? I think, too, which is the delicate balance, again, like we said earlier, of having the ability to sustain success but get over the hump. Because the last part of my question was, many people think you're one guy away so that you could win the Super Bowl. Like, we don't want you just to show up in the postseason. So that's where, and causes this crazy. Because
that's the thing. At this point, it's not just getting to the Super Bowl; it's winning the damn thing.
Yeah, it's winning the damn thing. And here's what's crazy: is that I think the shrewd move, and I think this is unpopular, and it's never going to happen, because it sounds bad, and it might end up hurting you in the long run. But doesn't it sound? It's not crazy. Wouldn't it be just behoove the Lions to say, Aiden, sorry, man. You know, it's business. We're not paying you. Sorry, Kirby. I know you want an extension, but this is the year. You go out there and maybe you give it to Kirby to reward him, but you say, hey, Aiden, sorry, you're coming off of an injury. It's not going to happen. And then you realize, okay, You go out there, Jameson Williams, you're not going to get a long-term extension. You don't pay right now up front. You wait and see. You add one or two, maybe three guys that are more mid-range, upper level. $40 million, you spread that over, $7 million for three guys. You pay half, and you realize, we could add three good players and a draft class, and you say, let's take one swing at it, because in the next couple years, you got, but Brad said they've already opened the discussion. So it just seems risky because of the injury, but because we are now staring in the face, realistically, that Aiden Hutchinson could be the reason why you don't get Myles Garrett. Mm-hmm. That's the situation, and it's tough to say because nobody will. We did a video and we said at Lions on SI, I said, okay, do you prioritize Aiden Hutchinson? Everybody was like overwhelmingly 105%. Yes, you just have to do it. You have to do it. You have to do it. I'm like, well, you don't have to. You just say, hey, I'm sorry. It's a situation. It's bad luck. You got hurt. You got a contract already. We got a chance to give you a fifth-year option. We got a chance to do a bunch of other things, but it does help the cap at first when you get someone an extension because the first year is always the lowest year. But I look at it like when it comes down to it, there may be – it's not a bad thing, cuz, to pay your own guys because they're good players. Like, how are you going to look at the fan base and say, don't pay Kirby? I mean, 15 teams would call him the second that his agent said, hey, we're not getting paid. 15 teams come calling. So it's just one of the deals where, and I think the conclusive statement is, in the draft and develop model, you've drafted a lot of good positions, but the star position that gets a lot of teams over the hump, the defensive line, you haven't been good at. And that's where it's got to improve. And so if you're going to go down that road, it would lend then to the assessment that Brad Holmes is not a good drafter of and developer of defensive linemen. And that's why you were forced to go get DJ Reader. That's why you're forced to get Zadarius Smith with injury. That's why you're forced to try and figure out how to establish a pass rush if Aiden Hutchinson goes down. So Mekhi Wingo gets hurt. Bad luck. So it's a rough situation, and I do think that's the final hump that they got to get over in regards to being able to get to the Super Bowl. So are you okay with the idea that Myles Garrett? And two, I don't think the Browns are gonna. I think the Browns are gonna really try to maximize their return with Myles Garrett. Do you think it's smart of them? I think they get what they need to do. I think it's smart to just say that so that the fan base doesn't think you're just gonna sell them cheap, because that also derails momentum with the fans. So I think that all the parties involved are doing what they got to do. But I do think that realistically, cause your optimism and your expectation that the Lions win the Super Bowl is tough when there's no room for a big. I think the Lions are one or two splashes away from being competitive, but you could say a nice draft class with the people that we saw at the Combine could be also interesting. Is there more than one way to skin a cat? Are you losing hope that maybe not that the window is closed, but that the cherry will be on top of the cake with a Super Bowl win? I think it's getting tougher.
Yeah, look, I think we've talked about this a couple of times. I feel like you have a finite window where you can do something really special with a group of guys that you've got, and you're starting to shrink that window. It is getting closed. It is closing on you, and it might be closing rapidly because now you drafted all these really good guys. You drafted all of this talent. We agree that you've done a really good job in the draft. Now, yeah, you've missed, and your weak link might be edge rusher and it might be defensive line. You've done a good job with your secondary. You've done a pretty decent job with your linebackers. I think you've had a lot of misses on that defensive front. I think we can all agree offensively, you've got a very talented team. Now you've got to start to either add back to that defensive front and that offensive line, or you've got to go make a splash play. And the way that you really help keep this window open, I think, is maybe adding in one of those splash players, And now it doesn't necessarily have to be Myles Garrett. He is the guy that everybody is talking about. He is the guy that everybody thinks is great. I think you're right when you say that they need to add a couple of guys and do it maybe in free agency, because you just don't have enough right now. You've seen what it takes to win the Super Bowl. You've seen what the Philadelphia Eagles needed to do to get over that juggernaut in the Kansas City Chiefs. Now you have to be able to get over the Philadelphia Eagles before you can even get to that point to play a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. So at some point, like you're just not good enough. You're just not there. If you are content with constantly being the Buffalo Bills of Detroit, fine. Then yeah, you got enough. You got enough to where you'll get to the playoffs and you'll get your heart broken every single year. But that is not the end game. That is not the goal. That is not what everybody here signed up for. And Brad Holmes knows that. That's not what he signed up for. At a certain point, you've got to go out and you've got to do something a little bit different, and you got to add a player that's going to help put you over the top. And I think that's why everybody gets so upset when you hear Brad Holmes talk like this and talk about signing your own guys. You see what your own guys are getting you to. Your own guys can only get you so far.
Right.
You got to be able to go out and add somebody else, somebody who's going to get you to that next level.
Right.
And we all talk Myles Garrett because he's a certified Hall of Famer.
He's a G.
Yes. Like he is that guy, right? He is him. If you put him out there with Aiden Hutchinson, good luck. Good luck. You've got two of the best edge rushers in all of the NFL causing a ruckus. And you know what that does? That instantly makes whoever's playing linebacker better. That makes whoever is playing secondary that much better. All of a sudden, Kirby Joseph goes from being a Pro Bowl caliber safety to being an all-pro caliber safety. And then you can figure out what you're going to do with your cornerbacks, because you had a guy in Terrion Arnold who had a pretty rough rookie year. We all expected it to be pretty rough. I don't think anybody expected him to be Sauce Gardner. And here's the thing. If you look at why Sauce Gardner was probably pretty successful his first year, was because he had a bunch of dudes up front in that defensive line that were causing a ruckus and making things really difficult on quarterbacks. So you can kind of cover up some of Terrion Arnold's faults with a really good defensive front, and then you can figure out what you're going to do for that opposite cornerback, whether that's Ernest Rakestraw or whether that's somebody else that you go and get. Maybe Amik Robertson fills in on that spot, and maybe he takes that step forward, and he's able to do that because the quarterback no longer has 7 seconds in the pocket. The quarterback no longer has 5 seconds in the pocket. The quarterback is more on account of 1, 2, and he's got to get the ball out before 3. And all of a sudden, your defense takes that next gigantic jump forward because you got one of those guys who's a G. And that's all we're saying, and that's all we want. And and we understand that it comes at a cost. And maybe that cost isn't signing one of your own guys. Maybe that's letting a guy like DJ Reader go. Maybe that's letting a guy like letting a guy like Levi walk out the door, and maybe him taking a guy like Josh Paschal with him. Maybe that's what that means, and that's what we're saying. That's all we're saying.
Got it. Now, the last thing here today, which is funny, is Ben Johnson is poking the bear, and he's pissing everybody off with his early interviews.
He might be enemy number one right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is. And it's interesting, too, because just of the fact that the Flames were stoked when he went to the Bears, so everything he says is kind of looked at from the lens of I hate you. So it's basically like, I don't care what you say. But do you think, and I said it in another interview, but I think it's funny. Do you think, and you're, as a shit talker, your spidey senses are alerted that, I don't think he's doing it maliciously. I think that he's getting a kick out of the fact that the fan base in Detroit's getting riled up, and he understands that, look, he's close with Jared Goff. They're texting each other right now, probably going, look what you did, asshole. And he's probably like, yeah, good luck. So I don't think that Jared Goff is terribly unaware that people think he's slow. And I think he's like, it's for him, it's all about, I need to progress through my reads and be able to find the open guy, and I can have success. And in the end, bottom line is the next step in his progression, because he's only 30 years old, so you have potential 4 more years of solid play growing, is when the pocket collapses, just stop with the happy feet, just go down and take the sack, live for another day. Stop trying to be mobile when you're not. I know you got to try to evade the pressure, but just throw the ball away. If it's to the point where it's a sack of -6 yards, is still better than tiptoeing around, getting popped, and losing the football. So, and guess who said it? The new offensive coordinator, John Morton, said it 4 times now in a sit down with reporters on the side, and now publicly with Dan Miller. He said, if we secure the football, we probably have a chance to win more games. Secure the football. So Goff knows that. Everybody knows that. So I just think Ben Johnson's liking the fact that, yeah, I got a mobile quarterback. That's a good thing. That's part of the reason why he went there. So it's not, in essence, what happens is that I think fans just don't want to hear it. It's too raw still. People are upset because they blame him. 2, he went to the rival. And 3, people just kind of want, like, hey, you also suffered with us. Like, you were on the sideline as we lost something that everybody wanted.
You were the guy that was calling boner jam plays where you've got Jamison Williams rolling out and chucking the football downfield. So you were part of the problem when they lost.
Yeah.
You take back one of those turnovers,
right.
All of a sudden that becomes a much more winnable game. I think that's the big problem. On top of it, you are calling out a guy who has become beloved by a city, and you're comparing him to a guy who I think is a bit of an arrogant ass in Caleb Williams. And yes, Caleb Williams does have different physical traits. And Caleb Williams has the ability to become a very good, we'll say top 5, maybe top 10 quarterback in this league. While Jared Goff currently is, and I'll argue to the death, that he is a top 7 quarterback in this league. And yes, if Jared Goff takes care of the football, you're winning a lot more football games than you're losing. Jared Goff also had a football game where he threw 5 interceptions, and you were still able to win that football game. But I think with Ben Johnson's comments, he wasn't just throwing shade on Jared Goff. He was also throwing shade on Aaron Glenn. He was throwing shade on that defense. And then there came another quote where he talked about how Penei Sewell could roll out and throw the football better than Jared Goff. And at that point, I just kind of think your little tongue-in-cheek and your little bit of fun and games becomes a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes a little bit more salty, and I think it becomes a little bit more nasty. And all of a sudden, it's not doing it with a wry smile and a wink. It's now you're just a dick. And I think that's kind of where Ben Johnson has gone. I think Ben Johnson is going to get pile-drived by the Detroit Lions, and I hope it is nasty, and I hope it is done in such a manner where Dan Campbell just kind of, in the post-game speech, because you know that's going to be bulletin board material during the week, I think Dan Campbell says something to the fact of, hey, Jared, how you rolling out now? How you running now? Penei, how's that throw? How's that arm? Defense, I think you look pretty good today. I think you're able to stuff these guys. I hope it becomes the bullet point material that this team needs when they face the Chicago Bears for the very first time, and I hope it's the bullet point material when they face them the second time, and I hope they make it ugly. And I really hope Ben Johnson struggles in Chicago.
Yeah.
I really hope he does not have a good time.
Yeah, no, it's exactly. It's like one of those deals where you were part of the family. Okay, you're not part of it anymore, but you understand that you should know personally the fan base is one in which they don't want to hear about what weakness potentially Jared Goff has. And look, I think the line that I think is inflammatory is not to promote. You are supposed to promote your own guys. You are supposed to say that, hey, it's like one of those things in wrestling. There's inflammatory promos, but usually the opponent will put over the guy first. I know you've been a champion, but you're not in my class, kind of thing. So what Ben did was say, hey, I got Caleb. He's athletic. I've never had a quarterback to be able to go off script and try some things. But then he said, and it was demoralizing watching that from afar going up against our defense. What he could have said, just the same thing, was, man, it's going to be unique to have a mobile quarterback that allows an offense to kind of do a little bit more things. Jared was different, but there's a lot of ways to win in the NFL, and pocket passers are still premier, but at the same time, having some mobility just adds to the toolbox for any quarterback. And any quarterback, the more tools, the better, and you move on from there. You know what I mean? He didn't put over Goff. And they don't do that a lot in the NFL, but it's done. So that's where people are mad. Like, you could have just sprinkled in, pocket passers still have some relevancy. You had a quarterback win a lot of games that way. So that's where it was. I think people are mad. Is like, hey, you put over your own guy, but you didn't put over Jared Goff publicly. So, but Lions fans, I agree with the column that was put out by the Free Press. Look, stop being so soft and sensitive. Stop getting mad. It's funny, and it'll be funny when the Lions drop 40 on the Bears again this year, and it'll be something to. It makes it fun that Ben did it, but I'm not mad. I just laugh and go, all right, good. Bulletin board material. And I go, well, yeah, I kind of do want that too. I do want a mobile quarterback. It would be nice. But if the Lions are able to sprinkle Jared Goff with some more weapons, maybe in the draft or somebody that comes available, then why not? But the shit talking has begun. And one final note, the funniest, I think, report that's come out of the combine, nothing related to the players, is next week we'll do definitely a recap of the Underwear Olympics. Adam's about to sit in his drawers and watch all the workouts from Thursday tonight until Monday, and we'll recap it all, who impressed, who didn't, all next week in detail. But a reporter actually went to Starbucks, Jordan Schultz, to go track down a national reporter to go iron out a beef online, and it involves Matthew Stafford, which I think both parties are right, and here's why. Real fast. Look, do you think it's coincidence that Matthew Stafford was in Montana with Tom Brady? No, I do not think it's a coincidence. I'm not stupid. I understand Matthew Stafford was given permission to talk to other teams. So Jordan Schultz said, hey, it's one of those deals where, they're hanging out, they're doing some things, they're doing some behind the scenes stuff. Well, the national media goes, well, let me go talk to the agent and get some information. The agent, I think, didn't lie, but maybe just kind of wanted to cushion the word host. Like Tom Brady is going to open up his bedroom and say, hey, come hang out. Look, in the end, I think it's actually kind of funny because I think both sides are actually right. But one side's trying to frame it more like intentional, like, hey, I'm recruiting harder. Whereas Tom Brady's agent's like, no, it was just a, casual meeting that these guys had. They both were in Montana. And so and guys always remember too, that technically, okay, please always remember this. The NFL is not journalistically ethical. Not in a bad way, but they're in bed with the league. So they may pretend that, yeah, they're journalists, but in the end, they are the arm of the league. They're the league's information hub. It's glorified PR. So what does glorified PR do? They PR. And what does PR mean? They spin shit. Spin shit in a way to say, oh, no, it's not that like that special that Matthew was in Montana. Just Tom happened to be there too. Two quarterbacks in the night just kind of hanging out and skiing. And they just maybe struck up a conversation. So remember that. Like, look, I don't blame Ian. I don't blame Tom. It's a cushy gig. You do have to present information. You do have to talk to people. But in the end, that's not the case. Jordan Schultz is a journalist. I'm sure he's not going to tweet that if he doesn't understand what's going on. So in the end, Jordan Schultz goes up to Ian Rappaport at the Combine at Starbucks and is like, hey, you want to start reporting shit on me? Say it to my face. And they had to get security involved. So it actually got to that point where if you pay attention to media, you're into that kind of shit, it's fucking hilarious where the journalists and the agent peddlers are starting to beef publicly. And there's another beef too. There is a legit beef between the podcasters and the entertainers and the writers and the hardcore. They don't. It's a media mishmash of drama and jealousy, and you're taking away the credibility of the work that we do. Versus, hey, if you were more entertaining, then you'd probably be able to have a newspaper to work at. So it's a fun time. Pay attention as dueling reports come out and stuff like that. But that's funny as hell, cause to see that media is beefing over what's being tweeted. But cuz Matthew Stafford, real fast, if he doesn't play with the Rams, what's the best team you think for him? Is it the Raiders? I think it is. I think he would be supported, but not for $50 million. $50 million? Yeah, he's trying to be an OG. But I think he ends up leaving, but I think he ends up making like 40 to 45, not 50. But I think the Raiders is a nice spot, and I also think if he can find a way to the Vikings, that'd be legit for him too.
I think the Vikings would probably be the best spot for him.
Yeah, agreed.
I would love to see him, and I'd love to see that awful wench Kelly Stafford go to New York. I'd like to see the New York media just eviscerate her and their shitty kids all the time.
Oh, God.
That would make my life complete, I feel. But no, I feel like Minnesota would probably be the best spot for him. That team is ready to win, and they've got talent all around. Raiders would probably be a nice setup for their family structure if you're taking that into account. But you have soft media in Minnesota, and you've got a team that's ready to win now. I think that'd be the place to go.
Gotcha. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast, and make sure anywhere you listen to your favorite audio content, just type in Detroit Sports Podcast. Thank you for the hour, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of the Detroit sports community. We look forward to breaking everything down next week on the next episode of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. The next episode of Doc and Jock comes to you next Thursday.